Good evening, everybody. My name is Thomas Sheedy. Welcome to the Atheist for Liberty YouTube channel. I'm the president of Atheist for Liberty. Thank you all so much for tuning in tonight. Consistency is key. We're now going back to having these streams every single week with improved graphics, improved topics, people from various different perspectives coming on in to make sure that this channel thrives and that this organization grows. Thanks to all of you. We've been getting more and more loyal viewers with the streams. We've been getting more attention. We've been getting a lot more supportive comments, so much so that we got more clips to create out of all these streams. And I'm going to have to actually make videos responding more and more to all the comments that you all keep putting in the live chat and also in the comments once these streams become videos. And then as well in the comments on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Parler, Getter, and more. Not only does Atheist for Liberty defend Enlightenment values, but we seek to learn from the greatest minds of the 21st century. We had a little bit of a weird kind of trend going on here. The last three speakers and guests, including the guests that we're about to have on now, relate to discussions about philosophy. Although I guess you could say that's all right, because we had a bit of another trend when it came to politics and other social issues for the first few streams. But we really want to listen to every single bit of advice and commentary that you guys as members and supporters of this organization give to us. We really do appreciate it. And I got to say, my job has been getting easier and more fun every single day, thanks to all of you putting in the time and energy to make sure that our mission of free speech, free thinking, and freedom for all not only just meets up to the title there, but thrives. And we're growing and growing. And I'm excited every single time to host these things. It's actually a real blast. And I think it's going to be a really good back and forth kind of casual banter between this good friend of mine that I'm going to be introducing in just a moment. Our member of the week is Patrick Wilmers. Be like Patrick and become a member today at atheistforliberty.org, okay? We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. All donations are tax deductible. We care about secularism. We care about fighting for rationality. We care about improving our conversations, which is another thing we're going to be talking about tonight as well. And we really do want to pay attention to you guys, the members and loyal supporters of this organization, to making sure that we really live up to our name and that we really do what we can to fight for liberty on a daily basis. I'm going to introduce our speaker now. So, Steve McRae is a Navy nuke specialist turned philosophy enthusiast. He specializes in epistemology and atheistic logic and philosophy. He hosts the NonSequitur Show on YouTube and writes a blog called 3 a.m. Philosophy for the Great Debate Community. With an absolute pleasure of mine to welcome Steve McRae to the channel. Steve, welcome to the channel. How are you?
Well, Thomas, I'm honored. I got to tell you, I'm sincerely honored to be on here with you. I've looked forward to this for days now. I will say though, specialist in quotes though, okay, just to make sure that people do not assume that I have some kind of expertise I do not have.
I'm gonna be fully honest. You know, we every time we have a guest on, right, we're like, okay, we need a bio, we need a photo, we need a bunch of stuff, and we ask for the bio. And when I was talking to the comms team today, actually, we made the bio a little better, and we put all the information up. And people from the comms team are literally saying, you know, Steve's bio doesn't do him justice. Steve is such a great person. He's active. He's involved in all of our events. You know, he knows his stuff. And so, as a channel that does claim to be professional, we want to do what we can as well to make sure that the professional and amazing guests we have on the show are treated with respect. So even though I know we're going to have a bit more of a casual banter, probably in comparison to the other guests I've had on in the past, you still know your stuff. You still have contributed so much to the atheist community over the years. And I want to make sure that, you know, when we showcase your bio and showcase your credentials to people, that it's done in a way where people can really know all the good things that you've done.
Well, thank you. And that really does mean a lot to me.
And I really do mean it when I say I have been looking forward to this stream myself and having you on and talking to you more. I first really got to know a bit about you back in 2019, late 2019, going into early 2020, when, you know, the kind of uncanceling of David Silverman was going on. You were a guest on the Drunken Peasants podcast. I got Dave to go on that show, and you were a good, amazing, loyal, enthusiastic person going in, really getting involved in that fight to stand up for what you think is right. And I think that's going to be a common theme with our discussion tonight, how you kind of demand authenticity. You demand, ethical behavior and ethical treatments of people. I see it in your rants online, and it's
My rants. It's a good term for it. That's a good term.
I've been known for rants, and I love your rants. And so I've been paying attention to you since then and all your amazing work. And by the way, everybody, check out the links in the descriptions below for all of Steve's content. We're going to get into some bits of that as well.
Yeah, it's funny that you had mentioned David Silverman, because I got to go on record to say that, look, I've dealt with a lot of atheists over the years, and David, whether we agree or disagree on certain things, is one of the very few atheists that had never once gone out of his way to make anything personal, to be disparaging, to be derogatory, and treat me inferior because we had different beliefs. And I always respected him for that. So say what you want about David Silverman, I got to tell you, he's always been personal to me. I enjoyed being on the Drunken Peasants with him. And so, yeah, that's one of the reasons why I kind of I didn't so much take up the mantle for him, but I totally understood what he was saying and the things that he had to deal with, and I empathized with him on that.
And there's a lot of things that you didn't have to do. You don't have to go on every stream. You don't have to be active. You don't have to go into our Atheist for Liberty Discord server and participate in all of our online events, which are awesome, by the way. Great.
They are good. They're fun,
everybody to joining, but you do it anyways. You go out of your way and you do it anyways. You make time, which really shows you how much of a inclusive and humanistic individual you really are.
I appreciate that.
Not to make this entire show the de-essing contest of every speaker here, but I have a lot of admiration for the speakers that come here on the show, and I really do appreciate it. So I think this is going to be a very good discussion tonight.
Yeah, and I'm honored to be in that. I've seen your guests. There's some amazing speakers. I mean, really great conversations recently. Yeah.
We mean what we say when we say greatest minds of the 21st century. It's a talking point that we put in the scripts, but it's for a reason.
Yeah, I've seen some of the great minds in there. Some really brilliant people that I've watched you have conversations with, and most of them I happen to agree with. That's one of the reasons why I support your organization.
And we really appreciate it. All right, so we're going to get into it, and I am so glad that we got you here, because there's going to be a bunch of good commentary and a bunch of good questions I think really do resonate with your line of work. And I think there's a lot here that our members and supporters can learn from you and your experiences. So, when we oppose theocrats, when we oppose theists and religious arguments, and when we make philosophical claims against them, we come off and we brand ourselves as the rational ones, that we care about science and reason, that we are the ones that are purporting logic compared to them. And I would make the argument that we're mostly in the right still when it comes to that. But too often when we have had that high of thinking that we're always right and thinking that all of our methods of conversation are perfect, we make slip-ups. Too often we make slip-ups because we think, oh, these religious people, they believe in an invisible magic man in the sky, or they believe in superstition. Therefore, all their talking points are wrong, and I can just say that I don't believe in their sky daddy, therefore I am right. That we're the free thinkers free of superstition. And while I brand myself and hold that the majority of us fit with, the whole claim of that, we fail to see our own flaws, like I said. So you are known in the atheist community as a debater, right? You like to challenge people, and you like to make people think about, their thought processing. In your years of experience, in streams, on debates, in podcasts, getting involved, getting really in the dirt of all this, what are the mistakes that we atheists, we so-called free thinkers and rationalists, have made when debating theists?
Well, okay. First, I don't do as much debating as I used to. I did come to the community as more of the debater kind of style. I have a group called the Great Debate Community on Facebook. It's been around since the G+ days. One of my first debates was over something along the lines of creationism versus evolutionism, and I kind of made a name for myself because the person I had debated literally changed his position. He left young Earth creationism. I mean, he's still a theist, but he left creationism, realizing that after he looked into it, that some of the things, if not all the things I was telling him, were verifiable. And so the reason I have debates, I think, is if you think that you can change somebody's mind, right? A lot of the other debaters, they're just there for the audience. They just wanted to score some points so the audience agrees or disagrees, but they're not really trying to change the mind of their interlocutor. This I find to be deficient. If you're going to debate somebody, it really should be that you really want the other person to, agree with your side, because you actually believe what you believe. And likewise, if they believe what they believe, they have every right to try to persuade you. It's called burden of persuasion. And I think a lot of atheists have lost sight of that. They're doing it to score points. And by doing so, they use a lot of the same fallacies and fallacious reasoning and lack of critical thinking that I've seen theists use. I mean, so just because whether you're a believer or non-believer, they fall prey to the same types of poor critical thinking when analyzing certain arguments. And that has to change in the atheist community. If they want to be taken seriously by philosophers or people that are having these higher level conversations, they need to stop using these fallacious and rhetorical tactics, because that's all I've seen from the atheist community online mostly. And it's not doing any good any longer. Maybe initially it was that, punch in the gut to theists, a little bit of a, hey, we don't quite, accept your arguments here. But nowadays, it's like, I think you had even mentioned before, it's become hackneyed. It's become overwrought and overdone. Yeah. And it's like, how many times can you hear somebody say, I don't believe you, I'm going to hang up?
I've said this before a few times. I consider myself to be a firebrand. I do get that kick of saying things that, while they're provocative, are true, kind of rallying the troops and stating that, yeah, we don't believe in magical gods and magical beings. We don't believe in superstition. A lot of us are rational people. But simultaneously, when you're part of 1,000 or more atheist Facebook groups online, and you see the same memes that were created 10 years ago being pasted by some random person, as if this was just some magical new statement. I've been an atheist since 2013. I've been in atheist Facebook groups for years, and I see the same old stuff. And I'm still interested in this. Obviously, I'm the president of an atheist national organization. I still make a lot of those points, and it's important that we always sharpen ourselves up when it comes to those points. But it gets tiring, especially if they are so basic and they're so, to a theist who is so entrenched in their beliefs. In many ways, they're not going to be convinced as easily when it comes to that. And then I'll make one other point too. There's a criticism that is made of the atheist community, of the new atheists, by Christian apologists, and even by some people politically that have claimed to have seen God by reading C.S. Lewis. A lot of times they will make the arguments that the new atheists are very basic, that it's that a 13-year-old kid could come up with a lot of the things that are said by the new atheists. I would counter and say that sometimes not everything has to be complex. Sometimes the 13-year-old is actually right, but there is some merit to that argument, especially if we're trying to get them to see our point.
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially with, I call them the new atheist TM, and I didn't come up with that. That has been long around. And the atheist TM basically is a very subgroup. It's a subset of atheists as a whole. So this is not to disparage atheists as a group. Clearly that would be overreaching. That would be a fallacy of hasty generalization. But within the atheist community, there are these new angry type atheists out there. They're the ones that haven't really read anything about the literature. They don't study atheology, which is actually a real topic, the study of atheism. They've never read any of the literature. They'll know who obviously Arn Ra is and Matt Dillahunty is and Dawkins, or Daniel Dennett, but they have no idea who Alpi is, or Draper is, or McCormick is, or any of the atheist literatures, Mackey. It's kind of bizarre because nowadays when you have these discussions, theists are upping their games. They're upping their level of discourse, where they're actually making argumentation a lot more difficult. And the average low level, like you said, the low level rung that just does the memes, they're no longer in the conversation. They've excused themselves from that because they're not at the skill level to even attempt to evaluate those types of arguments, because they've not looked into them. They're just like, throw out a meme. They think that's an automatic defeat, or a matter of fact, it's called argumentium ad meme, right? It's an actual fallacy. And I see it more ubiquitously in the atheist community than even theists nowadays. And used to be, the theists used to do that. The theists used to throw memes galore and this, oh yeah, God, Christ, all this other stuff. And you're just like, man, that's not convincing. So think to yourself, if as a non-believer, if somebody who's Christian throws something out there with Jesus on the cross, or Jesus carrying a dinosaur like you would for young Earth creationism, think to yourself, does this weigh against my beliefs? Does this change how I think? Well, no. So you doing it to them is not going to have any effect. It's just bottom barrel rhetoric.
Meme warfare doesn't really always work out, especially when you're dealing with adults. Although memes are fun. We do post more memes day by day.
Well, some of them can be funny. Look, some of them I do find comical, okay? But that's fine. If it's humorous, that's one thing. But you're trying to convert your interlocutor's opinion, then yeah, you're having no effect. You're not adding to the discussion at all.
Like personally speaking, not in relation to AFL, I'm not a socialist. I'm not a fan of socialism. I'm not a socialist whatsoever. I am a capitalist. I think capitalism is an amazing economic system. Again, nothing in relation to the organization here. When I see these kind of boomer progressives, they sometimes when they defend socialism as an economic system, I've seen them, they post this meme of like Star Trek: The Next Generation. They're like, what we envision socialism to be. The meme was literally created in like 2009. And it's just a 90s photo of the TNG cast, as if, oh, wow, I just learned something amazing. Oh, socialism is going to be like Star Trek. I changed my view on socialism, guys. That's not how reasoning works, at least when it comes to changing people's view on complex systems and belief systems.
Oh, absolutely. And I should know, people that have ever read any of my stuff or been on my channels know that I do differ a little bit than most organizations. I do hold atheism as the belief God does not exist, or the theory, or the doctrine, or dogma, any of those. I do hold in the positive case. And I've argued for years on that. In fact, that's one of the reasons why the atheist community has excluded me, because they don't like that fact. Yet more of the I would say, well-known atheist YouTubers are now changing their opinions. If you haven't noticed, Rationality Rules, Cosmic Skeptic, and Shannon Q have now adopted atheism in the positive. So, there's some headway there. But as you said, these memes that they come out with, for example, like one of the memes I see all the time is like the whole agnostic atheist thing, right? You see this chart with the belief and the knowledge, and it has been torn apart ad nauseum by myself and a friend of mine named Joe from Answers and Reason, and his co-host Dave. And many of the people, we've torn this apart. I mean, we've actually, even to the point where even Matt Dillon thinks that yes, it is his words doesn't make any sense. And so you still see these people posting this stuff, and then you ask them the critical question: where's your citation for this? Where's your supporting evidence for this? You're throwing this out there, but have you read the literature on it? Because it's non-existent, right? If you're going to change my mind, I need a little bit more than that, right? And it's the same thing with Christianity or anything like that. Not to dive into the specificities of Christianity, because I'm not a theologian, nor do I care. But if you're going to attack a Christian argument, and it's a philosophical argument, you're not dealing with theology as much. You're dealing with philosophy, and you need to treat it as a philosophical inductive argument. And that's where they fell apart.
Yeah. And then when it comes to some of these people too, you then ask them, okay, have you even read the material that supports your claim? For example, Richard Dawkins, the God delusion, when he talks about the scale, the Dawkins scale, or speaking of Silverman, right, his book where he goes at kind of a more political science viewpoint. A lot of these people haven't even bothered to do that. They just, meme, copy, paste, Facebook feed everybody. That's not, in my opinion, that's just not how we grow a healthy community. Memes help. Forming community helps. Laughing helps. Not everything has to be complex. Not everything has to be philosophical. Yeah. But when we're trying to engage in these complex conversations, like what we talked about before we went on air, if we're debating a William Lane Craig, we can't half A-word it.
Yeah. Well, William Lane Craig or Swinburne, there's a really well-known theist out there that have very complex arguments. And so, like, for example, one of the more complex arguments for the existence of God is called the modal ontological argument. Plantinga has worked on it. Other people worked on it. It is not something you just dive into and go, oh, God, you're just defining God to existence. No, that is not a defeater of that argument. It requires a little bit of understanding of modal logic, specific to the axioms involved. And it's not that complicated, but it requires a little bit more than just, oh, you're defining God into existence, because that's a very lazy approach that doesn't even work. It's not even true. And so when you see a philosophical argument, especially from William Lane Craig, which I don't know if you ever watched, but William Lane Craig did a discussion with a friend of mine named Dr. Alex Malpass, who I think is one of the most brilliant atheist philosophers out there. Although he is more, he says he's more of an agnostic, but I mean, he tends to be toward atheism. But it took me 3 days to process their argument. I literally went to Alex and I said, dude, can you explain this to me? Because this is some complex stuff right here. And he took the time, and I took 3 days to parse it out and learn what they were talking about. And then I did a blog on it on my Great Debate Community blog, 3 a.m. Philosophy. And I think I got most of it out. I had Dr. Josh Rasmussen, if you know him, look it over. But it's complicated. I ain't going to front. It was something that the average person is not going to go, okay, William Lane Craig is wrong. And you guys ask him, well, why is he wrong? Oh, because he believes in God. That's not a defeater to their argument, okay?
Right.
I mean, and I get the same thing. In fact, I'll tell you the primary or the most common thing I think I've seen from atheists in a defeater to any of my arguments is this, and I'm not even kidding. Well, that doesn't prove your God exists. I'm like, what are you talking about? It could be nothing to do with, God's ontological status. It could have nothing to do with God existing or not. It is just, I'm just explaining something philosophically speaking or with logic. And their rejoinder to me is, but that doesn't prove your God exists. And I'm like,
as if you are
I'm not a believer. Why would it? And I've seen it quite often. And they're like, oh, you sound like a theist, or, which God are you talking? Which God do you believe in? I'm like, none.
Right.
And they think it's a defeater, and it's not. As a matter of fact, if anything, it shows that they're not critically thinking. They're not taking reasonable steps of inference because merely because I'm saying, hey, look, William A. Craig might have a point here. Swinburne might have a point here, or let's discuss this logical argument. That doesn't by any means entail that I happen to be a theist. And that's a huge jump in reasoning that I think that they make huge mistakes on. It'll be a little more smaller in your jumps in reasoning because I'll just mention to you real quick. There happens to be something called the law of parsimony. People know it as Occam's razor. And it basically states that you should not unnecessarily multiply your entities. And what they mean by entities are your premises, basically, right? And if you see something like me writing my paper, and you jump to the conclusion that it's arguing God exists, or say prove your God, you're unnecessarily multiplying your entities because nothing about that is explaining anything about God. I'm not trying to argue God exists. You're jumping from here to there with no middle steps in between, no smaller jumps in reason, which is fine. That's how induction works, right?
And but they're going showing any effort to agree to disagree.
Lazy thinking.
See your point. Just this automatic rejection, which
right.
Another big reason as to why I think our community has failed to really retain its longevity, you could say.
Yeah, but if people read my paper and they say, well, that doesn't prove God exists, I'm not going to take you seriously.
Right. And we're going to get into that as well throughout the stream. So, and I want to make sure, again, all the links for all the material we're going to be covering, everybody, in the description below. Be sure to check it all out. Some really good stuff. So, we talked about the problem, right? We talked about how atheists fail to make convincing arguments sometimes to, when it comes to debates with theists and theocrats and other types such as that. Well, we want to make sure that at Atheists for Liberty, we provide solutions. We are an organization that wants to solve the question that has always been asked in the atheist community. Well, what do you guys do for people? What do you guys do for your members? What do you guys do for creating a sense of community? What do you guys do for civilization? What do you guys do for this and that? Instead of just being an anti, being a negative, just combating something without providing any solutions. And we try to take that claim very seriously at Atheists for Liberty. One of the programs that we do engage in is a program called Impossible Conversations, based on the book How to Have Impossible Conversations by Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay. It's an event that you guys all get to participate for free if you become a member at atheistsforliberty.org. $12 for the entire year. It's $1 a month just for the basic membership, everybody. And you get access to a lot of really cool programs, one of them being a professional public speaking workshop. We want to make sure that we can train all of you to be able to lead and win the culture war from an atheistic and godless perspective from your communities. And improving the conversation and improving the way we communicate is a key factor in all of this. So we always want to improve how we communicate with people. And we want to equip them with professional experience to get them ready to lead the culture war. And throughout this, culture wars, politics, religious and philosophical exchanges, how would a growing freethinker who hasn't been to our Impossible Conversations workshops, who hasn't participated in our programs at AFL, how would they go about improving the ways that they communicate on a daily basis?
Okay, well, first, I've attended these workshops, and they are really good. I got to admit, they are fun. They're very inclusionary, so anybody can come in that's a member. I am a member, but they are educational. I think they're informative, and I think they do try to explain to people how to up the level of conversation, which has been something that I've tried to do for years. I don't like the basal conversations. I don't like the puerile, nonsensical approach that people come to these conversations. Basically say, hey, you're a mean poopy head. Yeah, go ahead, clip that one. You're a mean poopy head. That's like the ultimate defeater, right? they don't want to really listen to their interlocutor much, right? They already formulated their positions, which is fine. I get we all solidify ourselves, but you got to be epistemically honest and willing to at least admit you're going to change your beliefs with more information, right? You have to be kind of a little bit of dosastic flexibility there. We should be never so ingrained that we can never be demonstrated to be wrong on things that we think are the case, right? I mean, there are certain things that yes, it is impossible to be wrong about. In my opinion, a priori NAR is like A equals A. You cannot be wrong about that. It's just law of identity. It's true in all possible worlds. But things like, when it comes to like even an argument for God, you don't have to necessarily accept the argument as being convincing, but you do have to understand if the argument is valid or not. If you say an argument is not valid, that is a claim against the logical integrity of the argument. You're saying that's a non sequitur. You're saying that there is a flaw in the reasoning that's a formal logical fallacy, and that is something that needs to be demonstrated, right? And so I think that when people approach these conversations and they want to have, these engaging topics and these more difficult things, I've come up with what I call the 5 C's. Okay. And the 5 C's are pretty simple. It's basically context is one, always try to understand the contextualization of the person you're speaking with, right? If you want to go and try to take things out of context, you're not having an honest dialogue. If you're always looking for myopic things and these little abnormalities and inconsistencies we all have as human beings when we have these discussions, I'm not a professional speaker, and so I'm going to make flubs. I'm not going to be perfect every time. My story is going to be similar, but there's going to be a grain of truth for all of them. But you might be a little bit more here, a little bit there, less there. But we look for contextualization. What is the intent of the speaker? And you might have heard it as steel manning your opponent, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the other one would be clarifying. If you're not sure about what somebody's saying, ask for clarification. There's nothing wrong with, and it's not even playing stupid. It's just like, look, I don't understand what you're saying. What you're saying to me is not making sense. It is nonsensical. I'm not trying to like demean you. It's just, I don't know what you're going with this. And it may be something simple as, oh, okay, now that you explain it, I get what you're saying. Or it might be, yeah, I'm done.
And not only that, even if you really do have that winner mentality of wanting to win the conversation, do you know what helps when it comes to winning people over? Authenticity. Showing people, hey, I don't know the context. Well, I don't know, what you were saying. Please define it better. It's,
and there's nothing wrong with that. Look, if somebody comes to me and says, Steve, I don't understand your notation. Can you clarify it for me? The first time would be like, absolutely. Yes. Let me explain it to you. I'm happy to. I love that.
There's a reason we don't penalize 8th graders in spelling bee competitions for asking for definitions, context,
Yeah. Don't ask me to spell anything.
Place of origin.
Yeah, if you ask me to spell, I'm done. I'm a horrible speller. People know this, but yeah, there's nothing wrong with admitting you're just. I'm not understanding your argument. Can you just rephrase it maybe something might click with me? And they think that I'm like being sophistic, and I'm not. They think that I'm being like some kind of like doing rhetoric, and I was like negative rhetoric. I'm like, no, I literally don't know what you're arguing here. I'm not trying to be a dick about it. I just don't understand. And then the other ones are like principle of charity. Always assume that your interlocutor is really being honest, right? I mean, sure, there are dishonest atheists and theists out there. We all get that. But I'm not talking about those types of discussions. I'm talking about when you have a discussion with it, like say, like Graham Oppie. You familiar with Graham Oppie?
Yes.
One of the most brilliant atheist philosophers of our time. When you go, if you've had a discussion with a theist, they're not thinking to each other, this guy's being dishonest. This guy's lying. They're going in as, hey, something like, Dr. Rasmussen. Here's his argument. Let's analyze it from a very, intellectual point of view. People shouldn't be going, oh yeah, Rasmussen's lying his ass off kind of stuff. No, when you reach a certain level, you have to have a principle of charity that you have an honest, rational agent that you're speaking with. You can disagree with them. You can attack their premises, but don't treat them like some bottom of the barrel, a person out there that is trying to lie for Jesus, or atheists can lie for anti-Jesus. It happens. But don't treat everybody the same. Give some principle of charity until they give you reason not to.
Yeah.
Right.
I think we'd win over many more allies if we did that.
I agree. And look, there's sometimes the flaunt. If you ever read Greece's Maxims, he has 4 maxims of how to have a conversation. I'm sure you're aware of. And there's times to flaunt them. They're not prescriptive. They are descriptive. But there's certain times you flaunt certain things. And these are just guidelines. They're not hard, fast rules, right? I will not give principle of charity to somebody who I believe eventually is being dishonest to me, intellectually speaking, or epistemologically speaking, or is not listening to the actual argument or trying to straw man me. Yeah. At that point, sure, charity kind of goes out the window. Mm-hmm. And the other two are critical thinking. Always try to approach something from a critical analysis point of view, right? And that doesn't necessarily mandate that you have scientism. I'm not a fan of scientism. I love science. But scientific methodology is not the only methods out there. There are other methods out there. But if you want to observe natural phenomenon and you want to have an explanation for natural phenomenon, sure, science is the best. Not even going to argue otherwise. But science does have its limitations. And I think that a lot of atheists, a lot of the new atheist TMs, do not recognize the limitations of science because certain things fall into philosophical categorizations. Like, for example, if I say, here's a thunder and lightning. Okay, well, how this happens? Science can explain thunder and lightning, right, through physics. But what science can't do is explain things like why is there even a state of affairs of the universe to even have the thunder and lightning? Why is there even something that exists to even have these things in? These are philosophical questions of why there's state of affairs, not scientific. Scientific merely will explain natural observations by natural observations through natural explanations. That's what science does, and it's very good at it. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't work categorically across the board. It doesn't work for philosophical conversations as much as I've seen some atheists try to do that. And the other one is bring cookies. In other words, just be nice. Offer something. Be nice to somebody. Say, hey, Thomas, what a great haircut you have today. You're looking fabulous. You're looking well rested. Be nice. And then when there's time not to be nice, don't be nice. But
if only we could hand each other cookies through StreamYard or OBS. I think that would make every conversation more pleasant.
Really? Right? My favorite are macadamia and white chocolate.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah, on Long Island, there's a really good brand. I forget the exact name. It's based out east in the Hamptons, I think, that makes really good macadamia nut cookies. I'm going to have to figure it out. If anybody knows of the name of them, feel free to post them in the live chat or in the comments below, because you'd be doing me a solid. So want to continue this conversation. Let's keep it flowing. Let's keep, giving you the floor, giving you the platform here. And I want to do it. I want to do it very well. Yeah. Done that. I don't have a person behind the camera, so hence why there was a little pause there. But thank you all for being patient. So want to continue as well. There's a lot of great information, by the way, everybody. If you look in the comments below, you'll see all of Steve's links, all of my links. Before we go further, everybody, though, be sure to subscribe to this channel. Just hit the subscribe button and hit the like button to this video. If you're a live viewer, you can hit it. If you're watching this as a recording, once this comes out later on, just give the video a like. It really helps us out. It betters us with the YouTube algorithm. It gets us to be able to, fulfill more outreach to people, to reach more atheists, to have better conversations, and to listen to some great speakers and to know what our organization is about. So subscribe to our YouTube channel, like this video, and hit the notification bell to see more content. It literally takes 2 seconds. You all know it does. So stop being lazy and go ahead and hit it. Hit those 3 buttons. Tap the buttons.
I'm subscribed.
Subscribe. So, speaking of those links, speaking of that content, I want to get into something that you've been recently discussing about, is a new phenomenon with yourself, the publication of your academic paper, or at least the work that you have done to make sure that this academic paper gets the credit that it deserves. And I want to give you the floor to explain to everybody what they're going to be seeing when they do click that link below.
Sure. So is this something I started writing quite some time ago? I had been reading works by someone named Dr. Demi, who is reading my paper. He hasn't got back to me on finished. He hasn't finished reading yet, but I've talked to Dr. Demi. He's a logician who kind of dived into the foyer of philosophy. It's just not his. He even told me, he's like, the paper that he had written was really not his specialty, but it was something he just wanted to do. But I read one of his papers on a hexagonal approach to atheism and theism, which is based upon Burgess Jackson's work. He wrote a paper called Redefining the Presumption of Atheism. So a long time ago, in 1972, a PhD by the name of Dr. Anthony Flew wrote a paper. It was a very seminal paper called The Presumption of Atheism. And it was basically the front runner for a lot of the new atheism. Dr. George Smith, later on, 2 years later, wrote a book called A Case Against God. I'm sure you're probably familiar with that. And then much later on, you obviously had Fighting God by Silverman. And you had Michael Martin write a book on negative atheism. And so this was an argument that Flew had basically been running, that people should presume atheism rather than theism. And what he meant by it is basically, unfortunately, agnostic. He actually argues for an agnostic position, although he's not explicitly doing it. And so my rebuttal to his request that atheism be thought in the negative case, meaning does not believe God exists, rather than the positive case or the explicit case of believing God does not exist, has some issues to it. And my paper argues using a very formalistic approach on a logical scheme that Dr. Demi solidified in his paper, using what's called a square of opposition, to show that if you do decide to use these terminological usages the way that a lot of the organizations, the atheist organizations do, it will result in what I call a semantic collapse. This is a term that I use. It basically is axiological devaluement or depreciation, such that the word atheist no longer has any real value to it as comprised to a positive case, because I can logically prove, and have done multiple different ways, and in this paper show, and this is, by the way, this is going to, your whole audience is going to just turn you off right now, but I can show that this negative atheism or weak atheism, also known as implicit atheism, is logically the same as weak theism or agnostic if there's what's called no positive epistemic status. In other words, every lack of belief atheist out there that is saying I merely lack a belief but does not have any positive status, saying that they're not holding that there are no gods or something like that, they are in fact weak theist. They are in fact agnostic, semantically speaking. And a lot of them don't like that. They're like, well, how can I be a theist? I don't believe God exists, because you're using the same negative usages, which has to do with the negator is. Rather, for example, for your audience to understand, if you have a proposition, every proposition has the negation of that proposition, right? So you have P or not P, right? It is the case or it is not the case. Very simple. And so if they're ontologically speaking, it is the case that either God exists or God does not exist. It is binary. It's like a dichotomy, right? Would you agree?
Sure.
Yeah. So there are other options, but beliefs are not dichotomous. And so there are positions you can have: believe God exists, right? Believe God does not exist, or which causes suspension of judgment, or agnostic, where you have no position either way. Now, those are in the positive case. In the weak or implicit case, the negator moves from the proposition to the predication. So if I say believes God exists, if I have believes does not God, believes God does not exist, right? If I move that negator over, I now have does not believe God exists and does not believe God does not exist. So when you're looking at the logic, it's like, okay, you don't believe God exists. Okay, there are only two options then. Think about this. There are only two options that you can have if you don't believe God exists then. You either don't believe God exists because you do believe there are no gods, right? Because if you believe there are no gods, it entails you don't believe God exists, correct? Or you're agnostic and you have no belief either way. So it's a little bit ambiguous when you say that I don't believe God exists. So what my paper basically shows is that weak atheism, if you use that to mean atheism, then weak theism, you can use that to mean theism. And therefore you have a person who's a atheist, theist, and agnostic all at the same time because of semantics. So I find that to be axiologically less valuable to use those types of terms because of that very reason, because of that semantic collapse. That's a lot to process, right?
It is a lot to process, but that's why the material is available. You can all check it out in the description below. And the thing that I find to be annoying is I am not particularly turned off by your advocacy. I'm not turned off by what you are trying to promote. At Atheist For Liberty, we actually do care about diversity of thought here, and it's not something that is completely different to everything that the other atheist and secular organizations are promoting. Certainly, there are some people that would absolutely agree with what you are purporting and what you are saying. So my question then, just an unofficial question, is why do you think that Atheists For Liberty is one of the few organizations, at least one of the few remaining national organizations, that would actually want to give you a platform and allow you to state this?
A couple different reasons. Okay, so people know I've had a long history with the other organizations. I've known Arn Ra for a very long time. And Arn even told me that he's just said, look, Steve, if what you're saying is true, then my entire life's work is for naught. His words, basically. And I'm like, that's pretty hyperbolic. I'm like, this is logical approaches to things. These are not just, random ideas. These are things that you can actually show using logic to show there's some epistemic value to use the usages I use. I'm not prescribing them. I'm not a prescriptivist. Matt Dillahunty is a prescriptivist. He actually will say that either you if you don't believe there's God, then you are an atheist, right? He prescribes that, correct? He actually says that there are only two sets. There's theism and atheism, but we know in philosophy that's not correct. He's been told that multitudes of times by people much more qualified than I am. So when you as an organization don't really have that much of an interest in that particular side of the conversation, then that's fine, right? Because your organization is more dedicated to something that aligns with my core values of secularism, right? Eliminating young earth creationism, right? These things that we completely align on. And it's funny, dude, because I am known in kind of the atheist community as somebody who fights against young earth creationism. That's one of the things I kind of started my channel on. And yet I hate to say it, but I think I'm pretty well respected in the young earth creationism movement. Matter of fact, Dr. Jonathan Safadi, who hates everybody, gets along with me, and he even put my paper, a simplistic version of my paper, on creationministries.com or creation.com.
Not to give too much defense to young earth creationists, but it reminds me of the time when, back in 2016 and 2017, the atheist movement was heavily protesting the Ark encounter that recently came out around that time. American Atheists and the American Humanist Association, I believe, a few FFRF people here and there, a bunch of other local groups, tri-state freethinkers, they all got together to kind of protest this big thing. And I honestly, good for them for doing so. I think it is a very silly exhibit. I like that we as atheists and non-believers are able to organize and fight back against that kind of nonsense. But I will, I will toss in all of Branch Shore enemies or adversaries or opponents when it comes to this. There were a bunch of atheist activists who also went into the Creation Museum, went into the Ark encounter, and I think they had like free banana splits for people. They were more than willing to engage in hours upon hours of long conversations, and they were very, very kind. One thing I'll give credit to our Christian opponents to a degree, in that whenever we on the atheist side debated them, they were always at least very polite and very cordial on the debate stage. They allowed Q&As and allowed questions. Compare that to the current culture war.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I used to, and I watched those videos, and I like when they would go through the Ark encounter, which I think is an abomination to speak to science, but whatever.
And they're losing money.
Yeah, and Ken Ham, and here's the thing. I hate there to say like something like Ken Ham doesn't even believe what he believes, right? I think that he is a true believer. I think he's dishonest about it, but I think he's a true believer. And I do think that Dr. Jonathan Safadi is a true believer. There are other young creationists that I don't think that's the case. I think they do it because they're getting something from the organization. They put out so much misinformation that they, as experts with PhDs in this field that have written extensively on the secular side, because they had to actually do the work to get their education, they know they're full of crap. They know. But there are, again, the true believers. And so those are not the ones that I want to have antithesis with. Those are not the ones I want to antagonize, because those are the ones that will, in some way, like example, like Dr. Safadi, he liked what I wrote in my paper, even though, again, he used a simplistic version of it. He happened to agree with it, and so that is a way to disseminate it out there, right? I have worked with Dr. Humphreys, who got some mathematics wrong, and I facilitated a conversation with him and Dr. Hinke and Dr. Lachelle on what's called helium diffusion rates. I was mentioned in the Journal of Creation for that, and I was mentioned in Hinke's paper as an acknowledgement for facilitating that, because it showed Humphreys was wrong mathematically. Not that it was anything to show that the argument was completely wrong, which it was, but it was more to show that, hey, the argument is wrong, but look, there's a math error here. This math error just totally craps on the argument. This is not up for scrutiny here. A math error is objective, right? And that's how I think we should approach these things. If you can show there's objective errors, that's a great way to basically argue against these things, because math, I think, is and logic are the two most things that I think are objective, where anybody can go out and go, 1 + 1 does equal 2, doesn't it?
Yeah. At least for now. We'll see what happens in a few years.
Well, yeah, if Atheism Plus comes back, they might call that woke or something. I don't know.
Or in this case, Atheism Plus Plus.
Right, yeah, as a unitary operator, Atheism Plus Plus.
That's my dad joke of the day. Boom.
There was Atheism 2.0 that came around for a while, but that didn't last very long.
there was like Atheism Plus, Atheism 2.0. You had even some non-woke stuff. Like you had the Brights movement that popped up, I
I
think, in
remember
like
the Bright. Yeah,
2006.
that was.
So that was the thing. Like we all try to have our own little niches of rebranding. Now, I like to stick with what works. Let's stick with what works.
Yep.
So this is already turning into a great conversation, and we really appreciate all of you for tuning in. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, guys. We are really changing up how we do our comms. Great graphics. We got quote graphics. We got funny memes. We got a lot of informative content we put out when we put out opinion pieces from our editorial board and when we make statements. Graphics on Instagram are going to be made as well in many regards for that. So you got an Instagram account? Just search up Atheists for Liberty and go give us a follow. You know you can do it, so go ahead and do it. You're going to love it. We're the best atheist page on Instagram. Go ahead. We really appreciate all of you doing so. All right. So we just ended that little chat with a joke about Atheism Plus, right? We ended that with talking really about, woke atheism. The same thing, say every stream. The woke people, they came in, they took over the atheist community, they promoted a new religion, excluded a lot of people. I would argue the majority of said atheists and non-believers and secularists, from taking part in the movement. It's why we've been losing money, losing support. And I say we, as I've always considered, the movement to be one strong entity, or at least it should be one strong entity, pushing forward for the separation between religion and government and for the normalization of non-belief.
I like the way you put that. I like the way you put that. If I can interrupt for a second, because I should be pointing out, I like how you said non-belief, because although the organization is Atheist for Liberty, and I get why they use the term, and I think the term atheist absolutely should be normalized, no question about it. Mm-hmm. I'm not an atheist, though, right? In the way I use my terminology, and so I am a non-believer, though. And so for atheists to try to exclude other non-believers merely because they're not taking a term that they've been, and I hate to use the word, but I'm going to use it, indoctrinated to think is atheism, seems counterproductive to me, because non-believers should be allies, right? They should be allies. They're the ones saying, look, yeah, I'm not a theist. I don't go so far to say, look, there are no gods. But a lot of people do, and there's justification for it. There's absolute justification for an atheist to go, look, there are no gods. Let me tell you why. Right. And I think that, for them to prescribe that terminology to me merely because, I tend to more philosophical approach. They're doing the same thing theists do. They're what's the difference between that and a theist going, hey, Thomas, God exists. You're just hardening your heart, and you're living your life to sin and denying in your unrighteousness. It's the same thing. You're prescribing something to somebody that doesn't have these types of positions, right? Because I can tell you right now, Thomas is not a God believer, right? It's just not there.
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah. So they're doing this. They do the same thing. So I like the way you're inclusive about that. And you recognize that non-believers are non-believers, and that they would include atheists and agnostics. And you do recognize that there is a distinction, even though it's not necessarily prevalent or forefront in the organization. You do at least recognize in philosophy that is, the way it is. I mean, that's like most papers have written that way.
And I come at it, I come at, atheism, and I come at secularism from a different lens than you. I come at it from more of a political science lens, and understanding the successes of our community and of our movement in the past. We did it when we had people of different viewpoints coming together to fight for a common cause. Mm-hmm. We were successful in that for many years until we started to just not see harassment and hatred everywhere we went, at every conference we went to, and judge people by the color of their skin. So pretty much, yeah, it's unfortunate. And, we could go into obviously the history of all that stuff, but most of you can just seriously check it out in our past streaming episodes where we go into a lot of it. I want to get into some unfortunate current news by bringing up some current drama.
Yeah, so for it. Yeah, I think the woke stuff has already been talked about a lot, because I came in the scene in 2014, and that whole elevator gate from 211 was already, like, I can't say it was dying out, but it was, people were seeing the problems that were being caused by, and so I saw the issues with Atheism Plus, or I just call it Atheist Plus SJW anymore.
We got in around the same time.
It was bad. It was bad.
Yeah, it was like it was kind of like bathed in already, and by 16, I say this every time. Reason Rally 2. The epitome of Atheism Plus winning at the end of the day. People think Atheism Plus died because it's just some internet culture war term. No, just rebranded itself.
I
Called
absolutely agree
Atheism,
with that.
called the Atheist Community.
Yep. I've said the same thing, and I got demonized for it. I was branded a heretic for I was sounding the same alarm bells, literally saying, "Hey guys, no, this is not the way you want to approach these things." And yet the voices out there of the PZ Myers of the world, who I used to get along with, but then he went full wokeism,
Right.
and I think just mentally burned his brain out or something. And so I kept trying to tell people, hey, look, you just because they're atheists doesn't mean that you want to follow them, because they're not making reasonable, rational, logical arguments here. They're speaking to emotions, not to reason. And they're calling it reasonality. They're calling it free thought blogs when they're anything but.
Right. And they defend religious atrocities. You know, they rightfully bash Christianity and they critique Christian thought and belief. But when it comes to Islam, or when it comes to religions held by other groups of people around the world, they're apologetic because they put their own religious belief system before reason. So it's, again, preaching to the choir, preaching to all of you. A lot of you are smart enough to know this, and a lot of you loyal viewers have seen a lot of it. Please go on our YouTube channel, check out our past episodes where we really go into the history of all this detail to detail. But that's not why we're having this discussion. Wanted to get into a bit of current news. So we were kind of debating if we should make our own separate video about the topic. Like I should just make a public statement as the president about this particular matter. But you know what? It's a good idea to include it here because we've had discussions about this similar incidents in the past. So Atheists for Liberty, we've been growing. We've been rightfully growing. We've been getting a lot of people coming into this organization from various different movements and communities saying, wow, Atheists for Liberty actually stands for something. Atheists for Liberty is not repeating the mistakes that the old atheist movement made. And you have a, you know, when I started this, I was like 20, 21. Now I'm 24. You know, we really got our hang of this for the past 2 years, and we're really starting to grow. Now comms is improving, and people are noticing that. And one person who is definitely noticing that is a blogger known in what remains of atheist circles named Hemant Mehta, also known as the Friendly Atheist. He used to write on Patheos, and now he has his own. He's on Only Sky, I think. There you go, Hemant. I did a little bit of advertising for you. And when Atheist for Liberty came out, when we had our public debut, we had an open mind. We were willing to communicate with any atheist blogger, anybody, even people that kind of disagreed with us and our stance on things, to kind of get the word out that we're genuine actors. Speaking of authenticity and your quest for authenticity. But we noticed around, I would say 9 months to a year into our existence, we started getting critiques and attacks by Hemant Mehta himself. And I always thought of Hemant Mehta to be this kind of neutral, understanding, atheist unity kind of guy. At least that was the vibe that he came off as having back in 2014, 15, and 16, really before the winds kind of blew and before wokeism fully engulfed the national atheist scene. And we've been getting some recent attacks from him. One of them was based on a tweet that Michael Shermer made promoting us. This was around, I would think, a month ago. We started taking these streams, right, that all of you watch and love, turning them into short clips. So the first clip that we released was of Michael Shermer talking about atheism, how atheism is still quietly growing. And that's great. Amazing clip. Got a good chunk of views. Michael Shermer even promoted us on Twitter. Fantastic stuff. And Michael Shermer rightfully pointed out that we are an organization that doesn't really focus on partisan politics, but we genuinely care about normalizing atheism. We genuinely care about having a big tent. But we had the words conservative and libertarian in our bio on Twitter. I will admit this to all of you right now. It was silly for us to have that in our bio for the following reasons. We premiered at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference in 2020. And one of the programs that we do is normalizing atheism in communities that the remaining atheist organizations don't want to normalize atheism in. They don't want conservatism, the people, the woke people that took over atheism, they don't want conservatism and they don't want libertarianism to be secularized. Because if they're secularized, then, oh, wow, the organizations that we originally promoted to have this neutral stance to normalize this stuff, they have to then support atheists who happen to be conservative or libertarian. Oh no, yet you claim to be nonpartisan. And we had conservative and libertarian originally in some of our branding because we had that objective to normalize atheism at places like CPAC. We rightfully put up signs at CPAC saying that we are the home for America's conservative atheists. Why? Because there's no other 501c3 nonprofit that does it. Even though we are not strictly a conservative or Republican atheist-based organization, we're actually willing to extend a hand because we actually do want to normalize atheism. We want to normalize non-belief. We want to normalize the idea that you can advocate for the separation of church and state. We are actually nonpartisan. We just admit, unlike the other organizations that just want to, market to the left, we want to market to the other half of the United States. Because if atheism is normalized throughout the entire country, boom, the win for separation of church and state, growth of the Free Thought Caucus, you name it, could be easily achieved. Easily achieved. We want to repeat what the movement did 10 years ago. So we had conservative and libertarian in our bio. Some guy
I saw that, by the way. I did notice that as well.
So some guy pointed it out to us in the comments of a Twitter thread, some random Twitter user, when Michael Shermer was promoting us. And I literally went on the company account and said, my bad, my mistake. We admit that we did that. My apologies. We're going through comms reforms. We're bettering the way we brand ourselves. We want to really kind of better communicate what we're actually about and what we actually started out to be. We didn't start out to be simply a conservative or Republican organization. Yet, Hemant Mehta is a smart guy. I'll admit that. I think he's a smart person. I don't think he's a dumb person. But on nearly every single occasion where he's criticized us, online, on Twitter, and on other places, he has not reached out to us privately for comment. He usually, a journalist or a blogger would kind of reach out to you and say, hi, this claim was made about you, or hi, there's a report going on about you. What would you or any other representative like to make a statement? He purposely hasn't done that. We had Justin Vakula try to reach out to him in the past about it because Hemant's written some positive stuff about me when I was in high school. He wrote some positive stuff about Justin back in the day when we weren't doing the evil Atheists for Liberty organization. There was this private communication asking for comment. He didn't do that now. So knowing how smart he is, he probably actually did read that we admitted days before he actually made a tweet about this, that that's a mistake. We literally admit it. We literally fixed the problem. We changed the bio. You guys can go back to the Wayback Machine and look. Yes, we did have conservative and libertarian in it. We admit it. Oh no, authenticity, people.
Yeah.
Just to finish this one thing up, Hemant then basically claimed, "Oh, we're lying. We're really a conservative organization. We're lying about it. We're going back on it." That's not true, and that Shermer's somehow wrong with his statement. None of that is true. And knowing Hemant Mehta and knowing how smart I actually do genuinely think he is.
Oh yeah, he very is.
He intentionally left that out because he wanted his own religion, his own belief system. Instead of atheist normalcy, this bipartisan atheism that he claimed to have 10 years ago, he wants the religion of social justice to win instead of the bipartisan atheism and the genuine willingness that we have to actually answer any questions he actually wants to send to us in private.
Yeah. Okay. So all cards on the table with Hemant. I do go way back with Hemant. He was one of the original guests on the NonSequitur Show. I have, in recent times, kind of like maintained a neutrality with him because he had written some things that I totally disagreed with. And one of my first experiences with Hemant was, hey, I have some things I disagree with you on. I went to him in private in private messages and said, would you like to talk to me about this before I write about it? He said he wasn't interested in talking about it. Okay, fair enough. I wrote about it. Later on, it came out that I somehow was using this to attack Hemant. Even though in my video, I was like, look, I got a lot of respect for Hemant. I think that he's a really, like you said, a very brilliant guy, actually, but I disagree with him fundamentally on many different things. And it became an attack thing. Steve's attacking Hemant Mehta, the friendly atheist. By the way, it's kind of a misnomer. Hemant is, look, again, I'm not going to get any beef with Hemant, but friendly atheist is questionable at this point. Because yeah, he really is hard on going for cancellation of people that disagree with him, as far as like anybody who doesn't subscribe to his brand of social justice warriors. There's no middle ground with him. And I do think, unfortunately, he is catering more to the woke audience. He is catering more to people that happen to agree with him from a more radicalized point of view, because unfortunately, I'm just going to say it flat out, social justice and atheism plus, and even a lot of atheist communities has a lot of religiosity into it. Even though atheism itself is not a religion, I have multiple videos explaining why atheism cannot be a religion, just like theism cannot be a religion. It doesn't mean that certain people do not have very strong religiosity as far as fundamentalism, as far as ideological thinking that just will not be changed regardless of the approach you take with them. It's dogmatic. And he's one of those people that fell into that trap. Same thing with PC Myers, unfortunately. And I've seen it. I've called it out. I got vilified for it. But as far as like, going after, Hammond, I just point out, hey, Hammond, you have some arguments here that I disagree with you on. Here's why I disagree with him. But he's never once came back and said, okay, these are, your arguments. Let me address them. Not once. So I don't think he's interested in having a dialogue on people that disagree with him. I don't think it's not his thing. He just wants to put out what he wants to put out. If you disagree with him, you're fundamentally wrong in his view, and that's his brand.
What I'll probably do too is I'll go ahead and actually edit the links in the stream, and I'll actually include some clips when I was on Atheist Republic's YouTube channel. I was talking about back in late 2020, early 2021, when we were simultaneously getting criticized by Hammond back in the day. It's the same stuff. And I bring this up as well because he did it again. This was, I think, 2 to 3 days ago. He made a tweet. I think this was over the weekend, criticizing us. How dare? Why has the Republican atheist organization, Atheist Liberty, number one, we're not partisan. Two, we're not catering to only conservatives and Republicans. Okay, we have liberals, we have libertarians, we have centrists, we have atheists who care about normalizing atheism and promoting secularism too within the organization. So we're not strictly a Republican or conservative atheist group, or at least only. He said, why have you guys not criticized? I'm misconstruing here. I don't have the exact tweet up on, I'm not sharing the tweet or anything like that. I don't have a screen share right now, but, why hasn't Atheist for Liberty, openly disagreed or openly talked to James Lindsay about speaking at a Turning Point Faith conference, basically trying to say, Atheists for Liberty, they claim to be for secularism. I guess they're not, knowing very well the circumstances of this situation.
Well, first of all, telling James to do anything is not going to go well in your favor. I can tell you right now. I like James. He's a
great guy, great advisor to us. He is an atheist. He doesn't believe in God. But he has, him being an advisor for Atheist For Liberty is not the only thing going on in his career. Right. He leads an entirely new organization called New Discourses, right? That's not an atheist organization. It's an anti-woke organization. And so when it comes to the objective of his organization that he leads, that he's founded and he leads, it has some slightly different objectives in Atheist For Liberty. We're allies. New Discourses and AFL, we have a very good relationship, obviously, because there's a lot of free-thinking individuals and atheists that are within New Discourses too. But there's some differences there. And so when James Lindsay goes to Turning Point, not just Turning Point USA, but literally Turning Point Faith events, like, I don't approve of Turning Point Faith's existence. I know why it was created. I like the fact that we've gone to Turning Point USA events. Don't like the New Faith Initiative, personally speaking here. But I understand why he's doing it. He's there to promote New Discourses. And he's there to speak with the religious people on wokeism. And I'll point something else out, too, when it comes to all this. There was this great push when Atheism Plus was going on in the atheist community of, let's work with religious progressives. Let's go to religious events and work with religious pastors who are progressives. Let's be with theists. Let's go to theist events when they support social justice. But when we're with theists that don't support that new religion, all of a sudden, we're contradicting ourselves. We're the bad guys. We're contradicting ourselves somehow when we're not. When I've admitted here on the stream that I personally don't like the existence of Turning Point Faith. When if I was in James's position, maybe I wouldn't have gone to the Turning Point Faith event. I might have gone to the other generic Turning Point USA events or different events in general. But I'm not him. He's also his own.
Each his own, right?
Knows this.
Yeah,
no, he's smart enough to know the context.
Absolutely, but in his view, it is his way or no way. And again, that's the SJW mentality. There is no compromise with those those type of woke. But as far as like speaking of engagements, my philosophy is simple. People have a right to go anywhere they think is advantageous to them, right? Whether I agree with it or not is irrelevant. There's certain Christian organizations I would probably have no interest of ever in my life stepping foot in the building, more or less, having a discussion with, like Steadfast or a Fundamental Baptist. They are deplorable, despicable people to me.
Right.
But for example, I had the honor a couple years ago, I think it was 2020, I was invited to speak for an epistemological seminar for an atheist and theist book club. In fact, a couple people in the audience from there. Stephen Hoyt was there. TJ Tuttle was there. Eric Hernandez was there. It was a really great discussion. It was one of the pinnacles of my life. I enjoyed it that much. It was freaking fantastic. And there were atheists and theists there, right? So it was a little bit mixed. There might be Christian organizations or organizations where it'd be advantageous to have a non-believer speak for that. I don't know the organization you're speaking with firsthand, so I don't know the intricacies. But I know that Lindsay is somebody who's going to do what he wants. He's a very brilliant guy, by the way. That dude is smart as a whip. And he's a great guest. And so, yeah, I mean, he probably has his reasons for why, and I don't think there's anything wrong with reaching across the aisle. However, there's a limitation. For example,
absolutely,
I'm not gonna work in conjunction with Atheists and Genesis. Okay, I'm not gonna work in conjunction with certain groups of people that I just find to be either morally reprehensible or just scientifically illiterate. Doesn't mean that I won't talk to some of the members, like for example, the people that write for these things. Yes, I have a good rapport with. And I don't see any reason why I wouldn't, because we're talking about their arguments and we're showing people why their arguments are bad. I might as well get it from the source. I might say, hey, look, you know, you have this argument on this Christian webpage here. I'm going to show why I think it's incorrect. And why not ask them, do you want to modify this? Do you want to, give me your view of my critique? I think that's advantageous in the long run.
It's free publicity. It's free publicity. So like I said, Atheist for Liberty is Atheists for Liberty. New Discourses is New Discourses. We're allies. We don't see eye to eye on every single thing. It's like how in the atheist community, American Atheists and the American Humanist Association, at least when American Atheist was actually into firebrand reactionary, atheist activism and criticism of religion, they differed from the American Humanist Association, but they were still allies. Smart enough to know that, I think he's smart enough to know that James Lindsay was there on behalf of New Discourses, his own person. James and I might have some business disagreements as to where we would send our organizations to, but that's fine there. And going with the publicity, I remember this too, and I really will edit the description of this video to include my Atheist Republic interviews. Hammond criticized us in an article back in late 2020 when we were actually tabling at the Turning Point USA, not Turning Point Faith, Turning Point USA Student Action Summit. We had a table there. I was apparently called out for having an interview with the Epoch Times, which is supported by Falun Gong. I'm not a fan of Falun Gong. There are plenty of advisors and plenty of supporters of our organization that are critics of Falun Gong as an entity, and Shane Yoon and a bunch of the other projects that Falun Gong supports. The Epoch Times, which is an American kind of right-leaning publication, is one of the ones that they support because it's against the corrupt Chinese communist regime. And I was asked to go on for an interview, right? To have a professional media interview there as president while we had a table there with reporters. Am I going to say no? Am I really going to say no to that publicity?
There'd be no reason.
No to potential atheists or theists seeing our perspective? I don't have to agree with Epoch Times being funded by Falun Gong to rationally see as a president of an organization that's trying to get the outreach to normalize atheism to be interviewed. Right.
Exactly. That's the same principle. I'll give you an example. I don't know if you know or know of Michael Jones. He runs a channel called Inspiring Philosophy.
Yeah.
Very well known theist and somebody who I've always gone along with. I had two people by the name of Mary Toko and Cindy Lincoln, who were both married to somebody you're familiar with named Ken Hovind. And they wanted to get their messages out because they'd been on my channel, or at least Cindy had been on my channel a few times, but I couldn't reach the Christian community. I don't have that big of reach, right? They well aware of me, but they wanted to get their story out to Christians. And what's the best way to do that? Well, from a Christian channel. So I reached out to Michael, and he was more than willing to give them a platform. Why? Because I have a rapport with them, right? You know, he doesn't put me in the angry, agnostic category, or I guess you would say angry atheist, but he doesn't put me in that. Why? Because I take a very much more methodical approach. And so there's no reason to burn bridges with people you don't agree with theologically or philosophically speaking. It makes no sense, because they could be, again, I hate to say it, but of use to you for promotion, or in this case, promoting Cindy and Mary Toko to get their story up, because we have a mutual thing that we hold true, that Ken Hovind is not a good person. We hold true that he puts out gross misinformation. And, so there's nothing wrong with going on Christian channels. There's nothing wrong with going to Christian organizations. But again, pick your battles. And again, it doesn't mean you're supporting them. But like I said, I'm not going to go to Answers in Genesis and do a speaking engagement. It's just not going to happen, right? Because they are so far way out there, right? Because they're not going to care what you have to say.
No, they're not. And the mentality that I usually state with, my members, our supporters, our followers, our allies is, we're never going to be, and I actually said this on your December stream, we're never going to be accepted by these people. We're never going to be, welcome at their dinner parties, in their social justice hangouts, in their social justice streams. Those days have passed, completely passed. And we have to be prepared to move forward and build our own movement, our own community, which is something that is totally fine. We will be sure to not make the same mistakes that the last movement made.
Yeah, no, I think we'll grow from that. Yeah,
exactly.
I think that start tabula rasa. Don't make those same mistakes, because I'm sure you would probably agree that the organizations that are out there now, especially when it comes to Atheist Republic, American Atheist, and even the atheist community of Austin, are quite different than how they started off. A lot of these apples and oranges. Very different membership, very different ideologies, very different things that they want to promote, which don't correspond to my ideological beliefs whatsoever. I've been kicked out of Atheist Republic and American Atheist because, I dare be free thinking. I dare promote things like critical thinking, reason, philosophy, logic. We can't have that. No. It's all about nowadays. Just you have to agree with us when it comes to whatever they say about wokeism. If you don't, you're done. That's it. And that's the entire
you're out of the movement. Some bloggers make a post about you.
I said preferably go with God that may or may not exist. I'm like, I don't care any longer. I've been canceled so many times I've lost count. I don't care.
Yeah. And you shouldn't. Yeah. I think it was just important for me to make that claim, because a lot of atheists still follow his content and see him as the atheist source for news and blogging and stuff like that. And I limit these kind of responses because these people are not going to like us anyways. They're stating it purely out of their religion, purely out of their partisanship. But I think it's a good thing for us to say, and also just to show the genuine members and supporters, where we actually stand. That we do want to be a home for America's atheist conservatives, for America's conservative atheists, while simultaneously we're not an organization that's only for conservatives. We're not a right-wing organization. We're not a conservative or libertarian organization. We operate in those movements. We are the atheist organization that is there. If you are, at a conservative event or a libertarian or at a libertarian conference and you want to find out who the atheists are, it is Atheists for Liberty. But we're an atheist organization that cares about secularism, that cares about fighting theocracy, that cares about normalizing atheism, and cares about also seeing wokeism as a new religion that we also have to critique, just like the traditional.
But you're not allowed to do that, though, unfortunately, in their mind's eye. They think that's automatically heresy.
And we're just as bad as Christian theocrats, and therefore they actually don't really care about normalizing atheism. They only care about normalizing their particular side, keeping that side, and making any attempt to actually revive the old attempts of the actual bipartisanship that used to be in the atheist community unacceptable.
Well, let me ask you, when's the last time some of these organizations even talked about atheism? I've listened. In fact, after this stream, I think around 7:00 my time, I'm doing a little review on something that Matt Dillahunty had said. I think he got some logic seriously wrong. And so on my channel, I do reviews of these things. And so when's the last time somebody's watched the Atheist Experience or watched any of these? Have any of them actually quoted anything from any popular, like philosophical atheists? Have any of them cited any papers? Have any of them actually addressed any argumentation other than, I don't believe you, and hang up? They don't promote atheism. They don't say, hey, look, this argument here, let me explain why this argument's wrong. Or they don't They used to, like, back in the day, believe it or not, and I got some pushback from this the other day, and I found the clip and people ate their words. But back in the day, Matt Dillahunty was like, I believe there's no gods. God doesn't exist. He would always call God's BS, and it just be outright, yes, I'm a positive atheist, and that there is no gods. That was his position. It still is his position. He's never moved more toward agnosticism. He's never moved from that. He's just rebranded it, as lack of belief atheism. But it's a little disingenuous. But they don't talk about atheism at all on these channels. I have a show called Atheological A-Holes. Guess what I talk about? Atheism, and from the academic standpoint. They don't do any of that. As a matter of fact, again, has a single one of those atheist activists ever looked at my arguments and said, okay, let's analyze this. Let's show where these arguments go wrong? No, what they say is, see, Smug, he's wrong. That is a definitive ad hominem attack.
And it makes people have an unfavorable opinion. I love being provocative in many cases. I like being a firebrand. We have to do what we can to rally the troops and to really generate community and to show people that we're fighting for things. But there's a time and a place for that. And if you're trying to win allies and you're trying to have reasonable discussions with people, you got to watch.
I totally agree with that. A time and place, right? But I mean, as an atheist organization, you can't still lose fact that atheism is a philosophical concept. It is something that is the flip side, or what's called a contradictory of theism. And so, yeah, you don't have to go all the time and prove theism wrong or anything like that. It's nothing like that. But up the level where you have away from these new atheists, these bottom level new atheists that fall into that whole woke thing, and you want to get the higher level atheists on your side. You want to get the atheists that are more into academia, that are more understanding of the philosophical concepts, and are able to articulate them exceptionally well. And if you've done that, by the way, the guests you've had on are indicative of what I would suspect from an organization that wants to up the level of conversation. I'm sorry, but you don't find that on the Hang Up. You don't find it on The Line or The Eighth Experience. They're not interested in upping the level of conversation. They're there for purely entertainment purposes to bash on the theist. And look, let's be honest. Nobody's going to be able to go on call a show and say, look, I'm going to prove to you God exists. Here's God. It's just not going to happen. Whether God exists or not, it's not going to happen. So it's just for entertainment value. And I think that gets old. I think that has run its course. And I think that atheism and atheists nowadays are looking for something new. I think they're looking for something to latch onto where they don't have that same, as you said, memes that have been out there for decades. They're looking for an organization that corresponds to what they actually want to talk about, which is things like, hey, let's not have secularism in school. Let's not have things like prayer in school. Let's not, allow people to rewrite history. Because again, I'm a firm believer. This is not a country that was founded on Christianity. It just wasn't. But they have tried to rewrite that how many times? I mean, it's
quite too many.
It's not, far too many. But anybody who looks at the history of this country, we're not a Christian country. We've never have been. And so, yes, those are where our allies are, because I don't want laws written under the pretense of something that they think their God wants.
Right.
I don't want that. And I will be on the people's side that want those same things, even if they have to be a theist, because most theists I talk to, they want secularism. Why? Because they're afraid that their particular beliefs from their deity is not going to be ones instantiated into law. And that could be detrimental. And they recognize this.
I think overall that is a very good way to end the standard questions, at least the questions and comments from myself. This has been overall a fantastic stream so far. And I think our viewers are in agreement. So really appreciate all of you for tuning in so far. Again, become a member of Atheist For Liberty today at atheistforliberty.org. Join. It is $12 a year. All donations are tax deductible. If you want to upgrade your memberships as well, there are more benefits, all listed on the website, by the way. We're a great organization. We're growing and thriving thanks to all of you giving your ideas and suggestions and being an active part of things like these streams. And be sure to keep staying involved and following us all on social media. For example, we have a Twitter page. Follow us on Twitter at Atheist Liberty. All right.
By the way, you're the only organization that I have a membership to, by the way.
There you go.
Straight up. I mean, I'm not trying to say that's a killer endorsement, but I mean, you know that how much shit, can I say shit on here? you know how much crap I've had on here from atheist organizations, and for me to endorse one of them as a non-atheist, but as a non-believer, I stand by that. I'm putting my neck out, right? I mean, I already get vilified for everything else, but I'm willing to put my neck out because I know what you believe in. I've known you for a while. I love my conversations with you. I think that you are passionate. I think you're articulate and intelligent. I think they've utilized your expertise in your history, because I'm familiar with some of your past, and I think it's done exceptionally well. And that's something that I want to stand behind, because even though I don't tend to conservatism. I do tend to probably more libertarianism. But look, there's things about conservative I like. There's things about liberal I like. Whatever. Yeah. But the
Same
core values,
AFL.
Exactly, and that's what I respect, because it's not political. It's not trying to push any particular political agenda, and it's certainly not trying to promote any kind of religiosity of, oh, if you don't agree with me, we're going to cancel you.
Yeah.
And every other organization I have seen that. American Atheists did that. Atheist Republic has done that. And the ACA and Atheist Experience have done that. They have canceled so many people that could have been allies merely because they didn't subscribe to their exact brand of woke atheism.
And I've been through it all, even just over the last few years. I'm still a fairly young guy, but I've been in American Atheists. I've been in AHA. I've been in SSA. I've been a part of committees in CFI. I have been a part of AAI. I've been a part of the vast majority of organizations, either as, a student activist, or as, in some kind of advisory capacity, or, having some position somewhere, somehow, and being involved in the planning of something. I've seen it all from the lens of a movement just collapsing in and on itself. And even though, we are kind of what remains of that old national nonpartisan secularism that used to exist, we're going to keep fighting the good fight, even if it's just us, because we only have one life to live.
Well, like I say, in the long run, I think you might pick up more people than you realize. It's slow going. It's going to be slow going. But I've talked to a lot of people, and they all tell me these similar things. The people that follow me, they are sick, absolutely sick of the ACA. They're sick of Matt Dillahunty and Aaron Ra putting out misinformation. And I mean willful. Well, I think Aaron Ra actually doesn't understand. Therefore, I can't say he's willful about it. But Matt's not an idiot. Matt knows these terms. Matt knows certain things. I think he does willfully mislead people.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people have recognized this now. There's been so many schisms, or as one of the presidents of ACA, Jamie, used to put out, kerfluffles, that people have said, hey, maybe just because they're an atheist activist, maybe they don't know what they're talking about, or maybe they are misleading people. Maybe there's some other things we should look into.
And I hate to agree with you on that. I hate the fact that I'm agreeing with you on that, because that makes our side look bad. It makes our brand look bad, but it's simultaneously the truth. And I think it's important that we remain ethical and on point as much as we can, while trying to, from a business perspective, be good as possible, be as best brand as possible. You can do both. So already an hour and 23 minutes in, and we're still having this conversation without getting to any comments and any questions yet. We'll take a few, and then we'll eventually conclude the show. This has been awesome. So thank you all. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. Guys, it's really appreciated. If you really like what we're doing here, become a member, subscribe to our YouTube channel, click that bell, because every time we come out with more videos, more clips, more content, more statements, more streams every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, all of you should be live viewing and commenting and really interacting with us, because we're going to be showcasing all of your comments now. So let's get right to it. All right. So we got Max with our first question. Is knowing the literature, back to our first question, always necessary, especially for supernatural beliefs?
I don't think knowing the literature is absolutely necessary. No, but it depends on who you're engaging with, right? If you're going to take on somebody of a higher caliber, like let's say like Eric Hernandez, he has an organization. I can't remember the specific name of it, but he's a well-read theist. There's a numerous amount of well-read theists out there that are going to be running a little more complex arguments, right? If you're going to actually engage with them, you probably have to up it a little bit, right? So it's not so much you have to be familiar with the literature, but at least the concepts, right? For like supernatural beliefs, I did a review of Aaron Ra, and he had been discussing the idea of what's called necessary being with 3 Muslims, and Aaron did a horrific job, just horrific. And look, I'm not Muslim. If anything, I'm not going to say I'm anti-Islam, because that would probably get you removed. But I mean, I'm not a fan of Islam. This is, so to speak. Okay. But there's certain things in philosophy that are just ubiquitous. There are just normative things, and what's called necessities or necessary beings is one of those things you just find throughout the literature. And he was absolutely butchering it. Why? Because he didn't understand what the Muslims were talking about, even though the Muslims were right. They weren't proving a God exists. They weren't even at the time even arguing for God. They were talking from a philosophical standpoint, and they happened to be correct. And so it's not that you have to know the literature, but at least understand the concepts, like understand what the difference between necessary and possible is, right? Or contingent, because you hear these things come up all the time.
This literally fits in comment to comment, because I'll also showcase our friend Ruin of the Gods. Go check out his YouTube channel, everybody, by the way. He posts great videos. Fits in with exactly what you were just pointing out. He says, what I have noticed is that there is a significant contingent of atheists who harbor a deep-seated contempt for philosophical inquiry.
Absolutely right.
That's why our past guests have been philosophy experts. We're trying to diversify the channel and showcase more points of view.
Yeah, let me tell you why I think there's some of that. Okay, one, people misconstrue certain things. It took me a long time to ingrain myself into philosophy. Over a decade ago, I was that guy sitting out there going, "Oh, all philosophers do is smoke stogies and drink single malt scotch on the couch, right, or comfy chair." I was inept. I was ignorant of philosophy completely. But then I ran into a friend that had gotten a degree in philosophy at the age of 26. One of the smartest guys I know when it comes to philosophy, and he just ran circles around me. And I didn't like that. Okay, I didn't like that. And so I started learning about philosophy. I took a course or two in college. But what I see now is that those people that don't move past that philosophy is just navel gazing, it's just lint in your belly gazing. They have that deep-seated contempt. And then you have misunderstandings of, like, when people say philosophy is dead, like when Hawking had said, philosophy is dead. They didn't understand what he meant by that. Right? They're like, oh, who cares about philosophy? That's not what he was saying at all. Matter of fact, he developed something called modal dependent realism, which is something that is a philosophical position in science. It's a type of scientific realism. These are philosophical concepts. He's well aware he's doing philosophy. But his argument was that there's been nothing very new in philosophy in relationship to these things in quite some time. That's what he was arguing. He wasn't trying to say, oh, we don't need philosophy anymore, because philosophy is the regulatory thing for science. What does science uphold? Scientific methodological naturalism, right? It's beholden to methodological naturalism, or if you really want to even say what's called non-overlapping magisteria. Science has to find naturalistic explanations. It cannot posit anything supernatural. That is philosophy. And a lot of people don't understand, without philosophy, science would be useless. So this deep-seated contempt, as Ruin the God says, it's misplaced. It's misplaced because they don't have an understanding of what philosophy actually does, how it regulates science. There's philosophy about everything, right? Philosophy of the arts, philosophy of music. These are meta things, right? These are over and above what the subject talks about. And so without them, a lot of these concepts would be useless, because, again, these determine uses of terms. These determine concepts like what is ethical. What is ethical is a meta ethics question. Right? It's not just ethics. It's what does it mean to even be ethical? Yeah. And then you have normative ethics of what you should do. And so I think Ruin of the Gods is spot on this. I think that atheists really are making a huge mistake when they discount philosophy, because philosophy is one of the most powerful things out there. Because what is it? It's reason. Yep. It's as Dr. Alex Malpass would say, it's the use of reason.
Very good question. He tunes into basically every stream and provides some of the best content for the channel. So we always really appreciate it. Thank you for asking that, or at least providing the comment there. We got Rolling. He's asking a question. Do you have an opinion on the book, How to Talk to a Science Denier?
Well, I haven't read that, but I have certainly talked to people that are science deniers, right? And when it comes to science denialism, it's the same thing with anything else. People just deny rather than listen to the arguments, right? If you're ingrained to believe a certain way, and I do believe that many of the religious people out there that subscribe to things like young earth creationism do so with the presumption that God exists. They're starting with that either a conclusion or a precept, one or the other. But they've in their mind says, okay, I have to look at everything from this worldview that there is a God, and everything that follows from there has to be in concordance with that. And they're willing to discount science in order to do that, which I think is a horrible approach. Obviously, I mean that is irrational. But that's what they would do, and some of them will be honest about it. There's I think it's Dr. Wood. I think it's him that says, "Look, I recognize that science is against all this stuff. I mean, if you look into the evolution, yes, it doesn't really show young earth creation to be true, but I believe it anyways. Why? Because I put the Bible first. I put the belief of God first. And so everything that flows from that has to be in concordance with that. That's why you have these mission statements. Every one of these religious organizations for young earth creationism has a mission statement that says, to the effect, any science that disagrees with the literal interpretation of 7,000-year creationism must by fiat be wrong. By fiat, must be wrong. There is no argumentation. It is they're wrong. And so once you've adopted that, you're not outside the realm of, I think, honest discourse, because you've just excluded by fiat that science must be wrong without any demonstration of it, without any reasonable argumentation. And yes, by the way, all the arguments out there for young earth creationism, they have holes in them. They do. But some of them are very, very, very complicated. And that's and I think that's what they go for. Because if you've got a PhD out there that's saying, here's the argument why, such and such about evolution is wrong, you might have to have some knowledge about the particular topic to go in and explain why. And they rely on the fact that most people don't have a level. I think they rely on it. So yeah, how to talk to the science
have all the tools at our disposal. We got to learn how to have proper conversations.
Yes.
We can't let our own ignorance get to us.
Just give them the science, let them research the science, but recognize you're dealing with two different types of people. One, you have the person who's actually not denying science that maybe want to learn and say, hey, look, show me. But then you also have the fundamentalist, entrenched theist that's going to say, look, no matter what you present to me, it's 7,000 years old. I'm denying, look, and it's not just evolution. They deny physics. They deny chemistry. They deny biochemistry. They deny geology, paleontology, archaeology, anthropology, morphology. It's just everything about science they have to deny in order to maintain their position, because they start with that position first. So how to talk to them, present it, and recognize what type of interlocutor you're having a conversation with.
Thank you, Rolling, for asking the question. We got Ruin of the Gods again. He made a very, very good comment that I think we can touch on. He says, in all fairness, libertarianism has always been a secular ideology, but I understand Thomas means a secularization of conservative and libertarian spaces. There's a lot of overlap between Atheists for Liberty and the conservative movement, same with the liberty movement. When we go to Freedom Fest, or when we go to events by Students for Liberty, or Young Americans for Liberty, or any other, Ayn Rand organizations, objectivist organizations, there's a ton of overlap. There's a lot of allies that we could gain. We're normalizing atheism and secularism in those spaces, gaining more people in the fight for church-state separation and atheist normalcy. Amazing stuff. But we have some differences. Just because we have the words for liberty in our organization doesn't mean we also focus on every little tiny issue that other organizations that have the word liberty focus on.
Yeah, and,
right?
and pick your battles, right? I mean, for example, there's a lot of things in the conservative or liberal spheres that you may not have any reason to get involved with. Like, for example, like the abortion debate. No, there'd be no reason to even touch on that.
We don't take a stance on it.
Yeah, no reason to. Absolutely. No reason. Why would you, right? But I can see these organizations trying to pull you in these directions, right? Especially as you get larger, they're going to want you to advocate for these specific positions. And yet, you have to maintain is, look, that's not our dog, not our fight. Doesn't mean that you don't have individual views on it, but as an organization, it's not relevant to the I would say the mission course, so to speak, the mission statement, so to speak. It's just not.
I'm into gun rights, for instance. What's that? I love gun rights. I think it is a very serious issue that a lot of Americans should pay attention to. If you care about liberty, you should care, in my opinion, about the Second Amendment in this country. Atheists for Liberty is not involved in 2A fights. Atheists for Liberty has shot guns before, and Atheists for Liberty is going to shoot guns again, and it's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to be having a lot of great branding sessions with that too, because a lot of AFL members, they do love their guns. But we as an organization, we don't take a stance on gun rights-related issues because we just don't. And we honestly can't. If we're trying to fill a specific niche, we can't focus on every little issue. We are anti-woke, unlike the other organizations.
I'm anti-woke, yes.
I'm neutral, but push wokeism. We at least admit from the get-go, by the way, that we're anti-woke. We're not lying to you and saying, oh, that's not an issue. We're neutral on wokeism. We admit it from day one. We admit it from day one. We're not lying and pretending to have some neutrality on it. But at least we're authentic on that, and we're not taking every little stance. But There's a reason why a lot of libertarians like us. There's a reason why a growing amount of conservatives like us. There is overlap within these movements, but the conservative movement and the liberty movement is different from Atheists for Liberty. And Ruin of the Gods makes a very good point. And he's been somebody who's been very supportive of us, not only online, but in person at these events for quite a while now. So we really do appreciate that. Really appreciate that from him. So I'm trying to pull up more comments and questions here. All right. Sal, thank you so much for tuning in. Got a question for you, Steve. He says, Steve, do you still respect Hammond?
Oh, that's going to be a killer question, huh? Look, I respect what he's accomplished. Like I said, he's very well read. He's been through a lot. I still think that a lot of his religiosity carries over from his early days, or something, because he doesn't seem to be interested in dialogue. So in the respect that as a critical thinker or somebody who's wanting to actually have dialogue, I can't say I respect him on that. But I do respect the fact that he's made a major name for himself. But it really depends on what you mean, in respect towards what, right? Like I said, I'm not trying to get into any beef with him. I just patched things up with him more than like a couple months ago. So I'm not going after him. But do I think he's an ideologue and a pundit? Yeah. Do I think that he's more into just promoting wokeism like P.G. Meyer was? Yeah, absolutely. And so I think he's left the atheist sphere. I think that he's gone more into SJW. And that I can't respect, because, don't call yourself the friendly atheist if what you want to talk about is social justice. They shouldn't be related concepts.
It splits atheists apart. It split the atheist community.
It really has. It absolutely really has. Yeah.
So I want to thank all of you for asking such amazing comments and stating such amazing comments and asking very good questions. We really appreciate all of you putting in the time and the energy to tune in and to be a part of this growing community. Again, not only does Atheists for Liberty fight for enlightenment values, but we seek to learn from the greatest minds of the 21st century, and we count Steve McRae as one of those great minds.
Stop it. Stop it. I'm actually blushing.
I swear, it's actually not a de-essing, contest in that regard. We actually do see you that way.
Awesome.
And you contribute quite a lot to our growth, and we really do appreciate the diversity of opinion within our organization, even if we don't always agree on everything. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Again, become a member today at atheistforliberty.org. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and be sure, everybody, to tune in next week at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific for our next stream. We're going to be having these every week. The repetition and the consistency is on, and we are listening to all of you with your speaker suggestions. Really appreciate it. If any of you are going to this in-person event, by the way, Atheists for Liberty will be at Freedom Fest 2022 from July 13th to the 16th in Las Vegas, Nevada. Speaking of the whole normalizing atheism thing and growing the organization thing, it's going to be a blast. And we're going to have not one, not two, but 3 Atheists for Liberty advisory board members that will be present there. Our growth is continuing thanks to all of you and your donations and your support and your volunteerism. So follow us on Twitter, like us on Instagram, follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, join as a member, and tune in every week for these amazing streams.
Do we have one more time for one more question? Because there's a question out there that's really good, and it's from Ross.
It's from Ross,
who I think is a professional philosopher.
Is this the one from from like 5 minutes ago?
When he's talking about the criteria of accuracy.
Yes,
criteria of accuracy.
Showcase that. Absolutely.
Yeah, this could be an hour long. Okay, literally, this could be a very detailed thing. But Ross does know definitely knows what he's talking about. This is kind of important for people that are getting into science and philosophy. There's something called scientific realism and something called scientific instrumentalism. And so scientific realism, it kind of mandates that the idea that what we see as a scientific theory is what corresponds to reality, right? It's not just an approximation. It is what actually is, like, for example, a space-time continuum. And so these theories that we have, like relativity, corresponds to reality. And so the criteria for accuracy is like dealing with what's called theoretical virtues, which is one of my favorite arguments from Graham Oppie about the non-existence of God, because it doesn't correspond to what's called the coherence to theoretical virtues. And so when we look at a scientific theory, we say, okay, what makes this scientific theory robust? What makes it adequate? What makes it explanatory? What makes it veridical with reality? You know, does it meet these scientific criteria of being simplistic, of having explanatory power? Does it have unification, consistency, confirmation with other things that we understand, right? Because we don't want a scientific theory to say, oh, here's something that explains it, but it has it's contrary to this other scientific theory, which has already been confirmed, right? So we have to ask, what confirms a theory? Why is it we say, like, look, the theory of evolution and the theory of relativity are confirmed models. They're not hypothesi. They are confirmed models because why? We've deemed them to explain and have consistent and accurate predictions repeatably over and over again. And they have other things, what's called fertility. They have things called, like I said, coherence. And so this question he's asking, oh my God, you can spend 2 hours on what makes a robust scientific theory. But I tell you, that is philosophy. Science doesn't dictate what those things are. Philosophy does. Philosophy tells you what's true, and you know what we mean by true. Excuse me. When you say, what's a theory of knowledge? What's a theory of truth? What's a theory of justification? These are all philosophical positions and things that dealing with philosophy. So they explain what is meant by the science. When science says this is true, philosophy goes, okay, what do you mean by true? This has been falsified, like falsificationism from Karl Popper. Okay, what does it mean to falsify? This is all philosophy. So that's a great question, by the way.
Great question and a great way to end the show. Thanks to all of you. Tune in next week, Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, as we continue to showcase a lot of great minds and where we continue to defend what is right in general in the new age of reason.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for tuning in. See you all next time. Thank you so much, Steve, for coming on. We really appreciate it.
It really is an honor. And I'll be seeing a few people, about 7 on my channel for my stream. But
yes, everybody, please
I'm
tune
humbled,
in.
man.
Check out Steve's links in the comments below. We'll be sure to update it. See you all next time.